Hello, everyone. Welcome to Clarity 16.0.2 Supportability and Feature Training. My name is Dave Sprague, and in this session, we are going to cover several enhancements that have been made to the road mapping area of Clarity. So, what's new? I'm going to cover off on the three things today. One is related to the roadmap timeline and specifically swim lanes. Um, The new update is the ability to use lookups or dynamic lookups can be used to define swim lanes. So roadmap items can be associated with a department or a location, for example, and that represents a swim lane. Secondly, users have an option to hide or show available swim lanes from the timeline. Another timeline enhancement is related to PDF export. That export capability that was introduced in 16.0 has been enhanced to include output formatting options for screen size, such as letter or A4, and orientation, such as portrait and or landscape, while you're in that PDF preview mode. And lastly, for roadmap items with linked investments, users can now sync some additional attributes between the roadmap item and those linked investments, such as budget costs, like capital and operating budget costs, forecast costs, department and location attributes. In addition, uh, the system now includes the support for multi-value lookups, syncing between roadmap items and their linked investments. So why is this important? Well, the first one related to swim lanes is it came right out of our customer innovation program. We're really happy to have a vibrant user community to help with prioritizing new and exciting features. Um, Users wanted that flexibility to use existing lookups to define swim lanes, of course, in addition to pick lists, and then hide or exclude swim lanes in the case where there are no roadmap items associated with a given swim lane. For example, you may be importing, whether it's through the underlying investment list or through CSV, and there may be multiple swim lanes where roadmap items are not associated. So you need that extra flexibility to deselect those swim lanes that do not have any roadmap items and just make it easier for your audience to consume. The PDF export, that is an extension again of a functionality that we had back in 16.0. And now we're meeting the needs of stakeholder communications where they're looking for those additional controls to determine basically the output, page size and or page orientation. And then synchronizing additional attributes is also kind of an extension. Allows us to kind of increase adoption for those users when they're prioritizing and sequencing roadmap items. They really expect that data from the linked investments to be in sync. So what's changed? Here's a view of the roadmap timeline with the new swim lane flyout that's available. Here's an example of like 4 swim lanes all selected. And then you have the option to hide or show those that may or may not have roadmap items associated with them, or you just want to take a different look at it and save it as a view. The swim lane selection has now been updated to support dynamic lookups. And here's just a couple examples of department or location that are there. Of course, you could scroll down and look for anything that was a pick list that you defined as well. But now you've got that flexibility. If you're organizing your roadmap items using lookups, those can also now serve as swim lane options. From a PDF export perspective, well, there's now the ability to, before it actually produces the PDF, is to preview it. And you can then choose your size. By default, we have fit to content from a roadmap timeline perspective, and the default is landscape. So that will just take all of the content and put it into a single view that you can then hit, say, download, and that'll produce the PDF on your local machine. When outputting, if you have widgets in view, those will show up in the PDF. If you have the legend open, likewise, that will show up in the PDF output. Additional attributes have been included for syncing between the linked investments and the roadmap items. Specifically, you can see those here. From a financial standpoint, we've got budget, capital and operating, and then forecast, capital and operating. And there's two others there for department and location. In addition, matching roadmap item and linked investment attributes that are using the multi-value lookup can also be synchronized from the underlying linked investment to the roadmap. Here's an example of an access attribute that's got multiple attributes, and then that'll be also synchronized directly right into the roadmap. The last item I wanted to touch on here is the improvement to the user experience from the roadmap. Here's an example of the roadmap timeline where you have a right-click action to open the details flyout. We got a lot of feedback from individuals that were not frequent users, but discovering where the open details or where the details flyout was located was a challenge in some cases. So we just added a right click. Now this is an example of the roadmap timeline with that right click menu in view, but it's actually any view now, whether you're on a board, a timeline, or a grid. You can use the right click action to get to the details flyout in any particular given workspace. This just happens to be an example of road mapping. Okay, let's talk about the demo. We'll take a look at all of these things. We'll look at managing swim lanes using the lookups, hide and show, and then we'll take a look at the PDF preview output formatting choices for PDF export, and then we'll sync roadmap and its roadmap items with the underlying linked investments, and some of those financial attributes, as well as the multi-value attribute. Okay, so let's get into that product. All right, I am landing here on a particular roadmap, and in particular, the timeline view. First thing I want to point out is that right-click action. Simply use that to, before there was just a details option, now a delete option. Now you have an open details option, and that'll just bring up the flyout for that particular item, as you can see here, and I can go off and do my configuring as I see fit. I'll just close that out. All right, so here we have multiple swim lanes. This happens to be a saved view for sponsor, so you can see the different roadmap items that are associated with a given sponsor. I will open up this. You have a new swim lane tab there, and you can obviously see the values associated with the swim lanes. So I'm going to uncheck Deborah. I want also to point out that we have some dependency lines that are coming from one swim lane to another, or within a given swim lane and exiting and going to another swim lane. So I just want to show the behavior here. When I uncheck a particular or hide a swim lane, you'll see the behavior associated with these dependency lines. So I'm going to uncheck Deborah, and so what happens when you do that is any dependency line that is either a target of that swim lane that was removed or a source for that swim lane that was removed, they themselves will be removed from the view. So if I add Deborah back, we'll get that swim lane back. Likewise, if I take a look and take out Rita Cohen, so this is the fourth swim lane here, you'll see that there's a swim lane exiting and there's also a swim lane within. So I would expect both of those to be removed from the view, and sure enough, they are. So I just wanted you to see the behavior of the swim lane when you're deselecting it, when it does have dependency lines. All right, let me close the swim lane flyout here. I'm going to open view options and just show you the swim lane pull down here. So obviously I've selected sponsor. notice there's department, there's location, and those are clear examples of lookups. There's also strategy down here, which represents, that's actually, if I were to open manage pick list, you'll see strategy is there. So the swim lane options include multiple attributes, dynamic lookups, as well as your pick list. So I'll switch views here to my location view. Location. So this is using, in this case, I've got my swim lane tab. I'll click on that, Chicago and New York. If I remove Chicago, you'll see multiple swim lanes disappear, right? I'll bring that back. There's multiple swim lanes that are emanating from this swim lane and or destined for the swim lane. So when, just like the other example, when you remove those, I'll remove New York this time, they pretty much all go away, right? All right. So let me go back to the sponsor swim lane. I'll just close this out. I can, if you recall, in the last release, we introduced the roadmap level events, such as I think this is today's date, and then here's one related to a shareholder meeting that doesn't have a line, is very configurable. I'll go ahead and open the legend here, and you can see, the color coding, the definition of the metrics that are both in the swim lane roadmap items themselves as an aggregate per swim lane. Now, the reason I wanted to open that flyout is so that we can include it in the PDF output. So I'll go over here to the Actions menu, and I'll select Export to PDF. Now in 16.0, you would just go directly to an output file. In this release, we are leveraging the preview mode, so it allows you to pick your various your configurations that you want. So the default is fit to content. There's a number of options here, and the landscape option is also a default. Notice when I'm in kind of the digital domain, meaning the fit to content and either one of these bottom three, if I change the format, it's not going to really take effect because I've already sized as kind of the chosen, the digital size is like the chosen output. So you'll notice I have my roadmap events here. I've got my legend in view. And even when the legend was in view, it did, have a little crop on there. So I'll go ahead and hit download. And, oh, did I click it? Oh, yes, I did. Oh, here's my idea and PDF output right there. Notice it's what you see is what you get. You've got the legend, the roadmap events, and the various metrics that are displayed individually on roadmap items as well as the aggregate. So that's a wonderful feature now added to the roadmap area. All right, let's switch to our next section. I want to go to the grid, and I'm going to select our forecast versus budget view. I want to point out a couple things here. So you can see I have access. This is actually a multi-value lookup field that's been established. Notice department is empty at the moment. And also our forecast totals, forecast capital costs and operating costs are nulled out, have no values. We're going to go ahead and sync that and populate from the underlying investments. And there's a few things sitting here for those new attributes associated with budget, capital, and budget operating costs. If I just expand that a little bit, you can see the whole thing. So we're going to bring over access, department, and some forecast financial information related to forecasts. So I'm going to go ahead to my sync linked items pop up. When you open it by default, everything is checked. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck it. I know I have a multi-value lookup that I want to synchronize, so I'll definitely check that. And here's my new budget and forecast attributes. I certainly want to bring over any updates associated with those four. And um, the department is blank, so I want to bring that over as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit sync. Now the page is going to lock while I'm editing. So let me quickly, while that's going, I'm going to show you the source. So we're going to come to the projects list, and you'll see a number of fields are populated related to access. I also have a budget versus forecast view. You can see there's heavy on the forecast side and not so much on the budget side. Likewise, I'll go to ideas, and I have a budget versus forecast view. Again, it's heavy on the budget side and a little light on the forecast side by design. And one more view here is related to the access information that is also populated related to these selected ideas. So let's go back to the roadmap. Go to the idea and project roadmap, and I want to be on my grid. And there you'll see we're in this forecast versus budget view. We've populated the multi-value lookup as expected. A few of them didn't have any values. The department field has been synchronized, right? You've got all that information now coming from the underlying investments. You'll see here that the forecast information that was zeroed out has been populated. And there's really wasn't any updates expected related to the budget, capital costs, operating costs information. So that was successful use of the sync linked item area. Again, I had only checked these particular items and department. Now, again, I chose matching custom attributes because I knew I had that multi-value lookup for access, kind of access type. Okay, so that concludes the roadmap update section. I really appreciate your time. Have a great day.